We are extremely privileged to be here in this part of the world. It's a great a pleasure and an honor to be here, surrounded by so many distinguished guests and delegates. What I want to do this morning is really just try to set the stage for the rest of the 2 weeks here. So I'm going to talk very briefly a little bit about what WMU is and our partnership with KMI, and then I'll go on to talk about how we hope the 2 weeks will unfold and the whole sort of, in a way, the philosophy of what CAPFISH is all about. So first of all, a little bit of background about the World Maritime University. It's fantastic to see one or two of our alumni here, and this is it's always a proud moment to see our alumni in very senior positions throughout the world when we come to the regions. But we are part of the United Nations under the International Maritime Organization, and the university was set up in 1983 by the IMO, mainly for the purpose of capacity building in maritime and ocean affairs in order to more effectively implement the IMO's conventions and regulations in developing countries. We offer a master's and a PhD program. Traditionally, that's been very much in the shipping and maritime sector, but more recently, in the last 10 years or so, it's broadened out into the oceans realm, and particularly with respect to fisheries. We have 7 master's specializations: maritime safety and environmental administration, which Professor Baumler is head of here, maritime law and policy, maritime energy management, maritime education and training, port management, shipping logistics and management, and what I'm involved with, the ocean sustainability governance and management. Each year we get about 130 master's students from all over the world, but every year the Pacific Islands are well represented. We have a total of 35 alumni from across the Pacific Islands. You can see here we have good representation, particularly from Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. And of course, welcome particularly anybody who's interested to do our master's programs. There are a number of scholarships available, so please put the word out if anybody would like to be interested to participate. Most of our students are exactly like you, mid-career government officials working in maritime or fisheries departments. In addition, I just mentioned we have many partners that we work with, and I'd be very keen to establish something more significant with the USP. But one of our key partners over the years has been the Korea Maritime Institute, and in particular, in recent years, we've been working with them to develop this CAPFISH project. But before we come on to the CAPFISH project itself, I want to just give a little bit of background as to where it's coming from and how to think about fisheries in the context of what we're trying to do here. And to get started, I want to just put a few little sort of reminders in there as why are we doing all this? And ultimately, we have to not forget that the global biological productivity of fish is truly staggeringly huge. Fish biomass is 5 times greater than all other vertebrate life on the planet. Of course, not all of that is food for human beings, but it is all natural protein, and therefore it forms a very key fundamental protein source for the marine ecosystems as well as us human beings. Key to this is also that wild fish grow without the provision of land, without the provision of food, without the provision of water, and without the need for care or medicines or antibiotics, what it might be. And that's very much in contrast to agriculture and aquaculture. So as a source of protein for the world, this makes a huge amount of sense. And the carbon footprint of wild capture fisheries, particularly the small pelagic fish, but also others, is significantly less than the other forms of fish aquaculture and agriculture. So we really have a massive incentive to manage this sustainably. And I think nowhere is that more important than here in the South Pacific, where the majority of the world's tuna comes from. However, doing that is not straightforward, and there are two major issues that stand in the way of getting towards a sustainable world of fisheries. First is overfishing, and the second is this IUU, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. Now, the FAO gives some statistics. They just had their new SOFIA report come out this year. Approximately 79 million tons of wild fish capture, of which the FAO estimates around 35% is unsustainable and overfished. It's variable across regions, but there is nowhere in the world that is without problems. When we add on to that the estimates of what illegal fishing is catching, we have to significantly up that, probably to around 50% of the world's fish capture is effectively unsustainable. It's particularly a problem in developing states, in small island developing states, and in the high seas. And this phenomenon of IUU has been around many years, but it's in recent years where it's really been climbing up the international political agenda. So much to the point that the United States Coast Guard announced that illegal fishing has surpassed piracy as a global concern in the maritime domain. So we're at a point where this is really starting to hurt and to be taken seriously by various organizations and countries. But of course it's not straightforward, because fisheries are extremely complex. They're complex in their scale, all the way from small scale artisanal fisheries, subsistence fisheries, to small scale commercial enterprises, local export, all the way up to large scale offshore industrial, and eventually to extremely large scale distant water high seas fisheries. It's not just the scale, but of course, as you all know, there's all sorts of gears out there. All these different gears have different impacts on the marine environment and their potential to impact the populations and habitats there. It's not just the gears, but the species. There's multiple species. Fish is kind of unique as a food resource. It's not like chicken, which is one species of chicken. Fish is hundreds and hundreds of species of fish, and therefore has an extremely diverse market. This is just an example from my own deep water surveys that I used to do of the west coast of Scotland. A single haul of the bottom trawl from 1,000 meters could yield this kind of diversity of maybe 40 to 50 different species of fish. And of course, it's not just the fish and the gears and the scales, but it's also the governance and the law of fisheries is complex. We have international agreements rooted mainly in UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, the United Nations Fish Stocks Agreement, all the various FAO instruments. There's World Trade Organization instruments. There's the ILO, the International Labour Organization. There's the International Maritime Organization. Convention on Migratory Species. There's a host of international law out there that's in one way or the other related to fisheries. Then within that we have the regional level of regulation and governance, which generally tends to fall to the RFMOs of the world. Here we have the Western Central Pacific, the FFA, and the SPC. And then within that region, we have our country-specific laws. This could be within Fiji, and then within Fiji, we have our various communities. And by communities, I don't just mean the small-scale fishing communities, but the big commercial outfits, the small-scale fisheries, and such like. And this all leads eventually to the particular nature of the fishing communities and the fish species that they're catching. So we are dealing with a lot of complexity, and of course we put that into the whole social reality of the world, and we scale that up, and we start to see some figures from the FAO. 3.2 billion people around the world rely on getting at least 20% of their average capital animal protein from fisheries. World fisheries directly support around 40 million people, the majority in developing countries. So it's simply not an option to stop fishing, as various campaigns might try to persuade you to do. But we can strive to fish sustainably. And what we have to realize in doing this is that if we want to understand it, we have to embrace that complexity that I've been talking about. We have to accept that fisheries are a complex relationship between the marine ecosystem, what we take out of that ecosystem, and the people involved in it. And this is where CAPFISH really tries to bring this all together. CAPFISH is about using collective intelligence to solve these complex problems. We think that you can only get a deep understanding about fisheries if you have a broad understanding of fisheries. It's very much interdisciplinary in that sense. We also believe that we need to surface all the knowledge. We think that it's not just an academic exercise or a fisheries department exercise. It's about bringing all the knowledge out there to the fore, from the fishers, from the various departments involved, and that's where you all have valuable experiences and insights to bring to the table. And in this sense, we like to call ourselves a transdisciplinary project, because we're not just looking between disciplines, we're actually looking between professional levels within that, and getting the contribution from all levels of knowledge. The problem with that is impossible to know it all. So there is a need to form close networks of collective knowledge. Cooperation and knowledge sharing is key to that success, and we aim to really try to create that collective wisdom based on a network of individual specialist knowledge. So everybody here in the room has their own individual knowledge, which together is way bigger than the sum of the parts. In order to do that, though, we can then start to think, well, how do we put it all together? And for that, we need to take what we call a systems thinking approach. We also believe that social and environmental sustainability must go together. Environmental sustainability is only going to be achieved if there is social responsibility and respect for those who are directly involved in the industry. If fishers are undervalued, if they're paid badly, if they're treated unfairly, if they're uncared for, how can we expect them to care for the environment? And what's more, we know that more fishers die or are seriously injured every year than any other occupation. We know that fisher wages are amongst the lowest paid of all occupations. We know that fishing working hours and living conditions are far worse than the maritime sector in general. Yet the seafood sector is worth billions, and you can buy a can of tuna for less than $1. So something doesn't add up here, and can we really expect fishers to care for the environment if we don't start to fix some of this first? Okay, so that's where we think we need to bring the human and the environmental dimensions together. The human dimensions include aspects of working conditions and human rights, social protection, coastal communities, gender roles and equality, aspects of the fleet itself, vessel safety, the law and the governance, the regulations, the standards involved in fisheries, enforcement assets, capacity, the institutional structures within regions, access agreements, inequalities, geopolitics comes into this, supply chains, markets, crime, piracy, corruption, and the need for capacity building and education. So these are some of the human dimensions that we'll cover over the next couple of weeks. On the ecological dimensions, there's traditional fish biology, like what Brian's talking about earlier. We need to understand things like population structure of fish. There's also traditional indigenous knowledge out there that we tend not to take much notice to or advantage of, but it's in many ways it's just as valid knowledge as any other knowledge form. So we need to think about that. Then of course there's the traditional fisheries science, stock assessments, which WCPFC is pushing out each year in its reports. But we also need to understand processes about the ocean and climate change, and will be one of the subjects today. Biological productivity, food webs, trophic levels, why some species are threatened, which species need protected, what is the environmental impact of fishing, and what is the impacts on biodiversity. So we see this coming all together in this systems thinking approach, and we see the fishery as a social ecological system, whereby we take the human elements here, which are influenced, of course, by political and economic factors directly, but they're also influenced to some degree by the climate, the physical, geographic, natural factors. This then forms part of the fishery system, but we also have the natural system, all those ecological factors we talked about, and again, to some extent, these are influenced by economic factors and by natural factors. When we put these together, we create the fishery system. And this is the framework which we want to try to hang all the various aspects of knowledge within. For example, fisheries system data. This is data from the WCPFC reports. We can see, for example, these are the Kobe plots, which many of you will be familiar with, showing that most of the tuna stocks in this part of the world are in a relatively safe space, with biomass above the critical levels and fishing effort below the critical levels. But it's not just about this target species. We're talking about ecosystem-based fisheries management. So we're interested in the wider ecosystem aspects. For example, what's going on with the sharks in this fisheries system? And here we find a rather different story. Some sharks are doing okay, but there's serious concern about the species here, which is the oceanic white-tip shark. It's clearly suffering from both the fishing pressure on it and also its current biomass. So we need to take that kind of ecosystem approach over and beyond the target stock. We can then bring in data from the human element, from the fishers, from fishing operations and effort and safety. This is just some data on fishing fatalities and incidents in Europe from 2011-20. This kind of data can be brought in to supplement our understandings of what's going on in the system. There's many different aspects listed down through there that we can start to find information and data and populate the system. We then have governance elements, the legal framework, the policies. What is it about? What are the infringements in IUU fishing? This is just a plot here of, again, from Europe, but it's all the different elements of IUU fishing, whether it's been in fishing in a closed area, fishing without a valid license and such like. This kind of information we can start to use and develop indicators as to how well our fisheries are performing and what the impact of certain policy changes might be. There's a huge range of key actors and stakeholders needed to engage with in order to get this information. Everything from the UN organizations, FAO, ILO, Interpol, OECD, WTO, etc. And then there's a whole bunch of national level agencies that we need to engage with: the Coast Guards, the Marine Police, port inspectors, labor departments, and that's why you're all here today, is that you represent that. But we need to go further than that also with the fishing communities, so the vessel owners, the investors, the fish sellers, the cooperatives, the consumers, the academics and scientists even, and the technologists and analysts. We like to think of this as a participatory approach. There's many disciplines, many actors. Some of it's top down, some of it's bottom up. And each of us has our own specific knowledge. And I think you're all part of the solution to finding a way forward in this problem. The whole idea is to surface and integrate that knowledge. Many disciplines in a participatory work, in an atmosphere of co-production. And that's what we'll be trying to do, particularly in our afternoon sessions here, where we'll be working together to try and co-produce the results and insights. So where do we start with this, and where does the CAPFISH project come from? Well, we being a UN organization, start with the UN agencies who have a remit in fisheries, and these are the three main ones, of course. The FAO, with things like its Port State Measures Agreement, its codes of conduct, its guidelines, international plans of actions. We have the International Labour Organization with its Work and Fishing Convention, also the Maritime Labour Convention to some degree, and the IMO, International Maritime Organization, with things like its Cape Town Agreement, the STCWF, MARPOL, which is a pollution convention, and vessel registration. And from here on, we can start to build with independent experts, RFMOs, practitioners, and so on. And this is really where the CAPFISH project and team comes from. It was on the back of a 2019 ministerial meeting held by the IMO on safe and legal fishing in Spain, and a joint working group of the FAO, the ILO, and the IMO on IUU fishing and relating matters. At that meeting, there was a call for a project such as CAPFISH to try to do this kind of work. So when I arrived at WMU in 2019, I met with Professor Rafael Baumler, and he talked about this. Oh, we lost something. Where did we go? And we started to develop a project to try and address this complexity with a capacity building dimension into it. We wrote various proposals, and it became clear that Korea was interested as a donor potentially for this project. And we hooked up then with the Korea Maritime Institute, Dr. Peter Han, who will be with us later during the academy. And we got funding for a 3-year project. That allowed us to employ Dr. Kathleen Auld, who's here. I think you met her last night. And together with the KMI team, Sarah, Ming Jung, and Jo Jung Kim, and such like. We ran a series of workshops for a couple of years, really, and this is where we invited Francisco to be part of those. In those days, we were still during the pandemic, and we never actually met Francisco in reality until today or yesterday. And we then got a continuation of the project to begin these summer academies, and we're now taking this first one to the South Pacific, and we're able to employ Francisco as our regional consultant on that. So what is CAPFISH and what does it aspire to? Well, in the spirit of the UN, we strive for international cooperation and political neutrality. Okay? We are not here to teach you how to manage your fisheries. You know how to do that 10 times better than we can ever tell you. But what we are trying to do is to provide a framework to connect those many dimensions of fisheries in order to gain a more holistic and comprehensive understanding. We hope you see this as an opportunity to think broadly and learn from each other within a university atmosphere. We're not asking you for your formal national opinions on this or your country's position. We're asking you for your personal experiences and thoughts and opinions on this matter. We hope this is an independent and safe space to voice those opinions, to air your concerns, to be critical, to share your real world experiences, to self-reflect, to challenge yourself, to see things from new perspectives. It's really the most important thing in many ways is to see it as a chance to co-create research, document your success stories, document your challenges, and think about what you need to prioritize to solve in the future in terms of actions. So as I say, we ran a number of workshops in Sweden, but also in Busan in Korea. We reached over 100 maritime professionals even during the pandemic from 32 countries. And we have several outputs from those. So we do try to produce tangible outputs from each workshop or academy. There are 2 volumes of the book. I think you've got the second volume here, but there is a first volume as well, which you can download from our website. We also produce academic papers. Kathleen is the first author on a kind of summary paper of the approach here. And we have the website. We then move into our Summer Academy program, where we took all the learnings from those 4 workshops into a 2-week program. And this is, those kind of global messages need to be put into a regional context. And the idea now is to move from one region to another over the next 5 years. We wanted to do this first in the South Pacific for various reasons. One is that actually this is one of the most progressive parts of the world for kind of international cooperation and coordination in fisheries. So it gives us a very nice kind of baseline as to how well certain aspects of fisheries can run. We then will move on to various different regions of the world. This is how the Academy is structured. We have really 5 sort of core themes. One is on the fisheries themselves, the fisheries dynamics, the kind of more traditional fisheries science, but also aspects of conservation, technology, and such like. We then have the law and the governance. What are the international instruments available? How are they implemented? What impact do they have? We then have a section really focused on vessel operations and labor conditions, a section on compliance, enforcement, and criminal aspects of fisheries and IUU fishing, and a pillar on economy and trade. What is the real global trade dynamics and the supply chains, and how does this all kind of come together through traceability, market mechanisms, and such like, and we'll touch on aspects such as certification. So here we are today. We have you delegates from all these different institutions, agencies, and government departments from across the region. I'm delighted that we got such enthusiastic responses from you all to attend, and we do really appreciate you taking 2 weeks out of your schedules, because this is a big ask, and especially at this time of year when there's so many fisheries meetings going on. We have a broad range of experts over the next 2 weeks to deliver the program, way beyond just WMU and KMI. We have all these institutions represented at various points. So on that note, this is how the sort of daily thematic sessions are going to run through. Each day will be related to one of those themes, in those 5 themes. So we'll start at a kind of global picture level. We'll move to the regional perspective, and then we drill right down to the local sort of individual level. In the afternoon, we're going to have focus groups where we split into smaller groups, and the idea there is to we'll provide some kind of prompting questions to try to surface that knowledge regarding the particular theme of that day. We'll then summarize that and we'll put it all together as best we can. To round off the whole Submarine Academy, we've been working with the Pew Charitable Trusts, who have developed a very interesting scenario role-playing game, which is a lot of fun for us to participate in. You take the role of Coast Guard and illegal fisher and such like, and you see how the dynamics of what you've been learning over the 2 weeks can actually play out in a kind of not real world scenario, but a virtual world scenario. And it's a lot of fun to wrap up the final day with. So that's the program for the next 9 days. Today, ocean sustainability, fisheries, climate change. Tomorrow we'll focus on illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. Day 4 will be on small-scale coastal fisheries and their relationship with IUU. We'll then finish the first week on international and regional trade in fisheries before taking a weekend break. We come back on Monday and we start to get into the labour and social conditions on fishing vessels. Day 7 will be quite technical on the fishing vessel safety side of things. Day 8 will be on enforcement, compliance and crime in the fisheries sector. Day 9 will be on cooperation and collaboration between agencies, between states, between organizations, and that final day at the end on role-playing and the